Hey, fellow note investor. Are you looking to learn the basics of note investing so you can get started? However, you don't want to spend a few hundreds or thousands of dollars and hours online on some training program? Have you thought about attending a notes conference? However, you don't want to spend the money or the time away from your family. Well, we have a tremendous beginners video series of 20 different topics, with each video being less than 15 minutes. This means each video is less fluff and direct to the content. Visit www.jkpholdings.com/beginner-series to learn more. Again, www.jkpholdings.com/beginner-series. Dave Foots here from JKP Holdings. Alongside of me, Nathan Turner. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's good. It's good.
One of those weeks. I'm looking forward to the weekend, but I think we've had a really good week, so I'm excited to know what comes toward next week. We have some things prepping up that we're really excited about. In our weekly Facebook, our mastermind group that we run weekly is pretty interesting because we're doing a lot of stuff that is out of the ordinary. So that's really, really cool. And we're building up to the big reveal for that, for our internal thing. For assets, we've seen a little bit of a low, but we've actually seen different assets from like lease options and so like that coming through recently. Some commercial opportunities that we're diving into, some actually in PA, some in New Jersey, some in Texas. So that's kind of coming up a little bit, which is pretty interesting. So I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like.
I'll have to get with you on those lease options and stuff. We're not looking at the same tape, so I'd like to see that. Also, if you're interested, I was just telling you offline here, I got these California loans. Interesting. They're interesting. Yes. So we'll talk later.
Yeah, if Gabe's out there, man, listening, we'll be talking to you soon, I'm sure. So with note investing, one of the big things that people have troubles with is knowing the property, right? That's one of our key things in our first space, is knowing who's involved, but also the paper, but the property. For the note space, seconds care more about the borrower than we do in the first space. We're more focused on that property, making sure that property is something that we know that if we take it back, what's the best idea of value? Now, we know that sometimes we have to do some rehab concerns, but unlike anything else, we can't get into the property and see it. And for people who are investing outside their boundaries, driving by a property that is not possible, what do they do?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, and that's one of the biggest differences with the due diligence when you're talking about the difference between the. Where'd Dave go? We lost him.
We got this.
Yeah, the due diligence between the first and the second is on the first, you're very much concerned with the property because there's a good chance you're taking that property back. So you want to know as much as you can about the property, whereas the second, you're spending a lot more time on the borrower. Where for myself as a first buyer, I hardly give the borrower a second look, like other than if they're living or not. That's my main concern.
You brought up a really good point, Nathan. Like, these properties are not in your backyard, right? So I have one investor that he actually was lucky enough to be able to only buy properties on his truck route. But if you're buying a tape in Indiana somewhere, you can just go out there and drive by to kind of see, like, hey, do these kind of seem like they're upstanding people? Is the grass cut? Is the roof caved in? Is there even a property still there? So I mean, we've seen it all. So you bring up a really good point, that need for the actual physical due diligence portion of it.
Somebody's got to actually look at the property. And that comes from even firsthand experience. When I first got started, I did drive them all way back. 2008. I rented a car and I drove around Ohio and Michigan and Indiana, which was actually a really good exercise because I got to know those areas quite well. But quite literally, I would go by, we had an address, and I'd go by and it was just an empty field. And so we didn't have what we thought we had. So somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, somebody has to go and lay eyes on that property and just see what's there. Is there is there a tree through the roof? I've had it where the front of the building looks fine and around the side, the whole side of the house is caved in.
Whoa,
All
sorry
kinds of-
about that, guys. I'm not sure
Hey,
what
Dave.
happened there. All of a
Welcome
sudden, my
back.
screen went completely blank for like 2 minutes. I'm like, I'm gonna just reconnect here and see what happens.
That works. You're
Whoa.
back.
All
We're
right.
just talking about some of the things we've seen where
Yeah.
sometimes that property is not what you thought it was. It's certainly not the same
Oh
thing
my
you saw on
God.
Google Maps.
So we are talking offline before we connected with everybody here. How weird it is where I was looking at a property 2013, 2014, and just so happened I want to look at the back of the house. So I went on Google Maps and I was just taking a peek before I dove into too much. And the property is missing. And I said, whoa, I must have went too far. So
Yeah.
the corner lot gone.
Yeah.
And if I didn't take a look at the backyard, I wouldn't have seen it. There's people on the front steps, the mailbox there. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. What happened?
Right.
It was gone. So BPO situations we get into is somewhat helpful to know where that property is in condition. But we're going to dive into even more reasons why BPO is definitely helpful to know, not even if the property is there, but more about it, how the local boots on the ground, especially if you're going outside your boundaries.
Yeah. At the very, very least, you need somebody to lay eyes on it. At the very least.
Yeah.
After that, then there's all the other stuff that comes along with that BPO, and that's why we've got these guys here to help us talk
So-
about
It's a big
that.
thing, right? If you're buying a performing or non-performing, you may have to go through disposition. And if some place is a total just disaster, hey, maybe it's better to do everything you can to get a payoff by the buyer than try and go and, see what it's like taking it to auction or anything like that. Right now, property values are insane. So it's worth getting that BPO to kind of see what your potential upside is.
Yeah.
Bare minimum, I probably 9 times out of 10, I would rather not take back the property just because it's less to deal with. And we've talked about that before and about how much easier a note is to deal with than it is than a property. However, like you say, especially now with property values going up, that prospect of getting the property back maybe isn't so bad, and perhaps even more desirable. And so it's at least a consideration, something to kind of look out for.
Yeah. So it's weird, BPO is something that people sometimes hate to do because they're like, well, I'm gonna take the chance, it's a small investment, or what's the worst situation gonna be involved? And the worst can be really bad. The house can be gone. But the best thing about it is most people don't realize when Google Maps and Bing Maps is they're not up to date.
Yeah.
We've been in situations where that property has tremendous upside in the last year since Google Maps updated, and you don't know. And you don't know what the situation is. We've had times where the agent goes out and they just happen to come across a situation that they just luckily got to where they saw something and told us.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, listen, we saw we couldn't go close. There's some people living in the house. Oh, it's occupied. Right?
Yeah. That
This is good
changes everything.
information.
Yeah.
Or I saw a ramp built for the handicap. Whoa, there's medical situation going on here that we may not know of. Little things. So
Hey, or you could find a brand new boat in the driveway and somebody's not making payments. So we've seen those too.
yeah, absolutely. So let's back up here and let Brandon and Stacey, what are typical times that people buy BPOs? What are typical investments they use BPOs for?
Can I take that, Brandon?
Sure. I mean, really, anytime somebody wants to get a BPO is generally when there's maybe more than just a little bit of risk involved, when they need to know a little bit more about the asset. We see them in all sorts of fix and flip situations and really anything. I mean, we see a BPO being ordered anytime anybody just wants to know a little bit more information about the asset or a little bit more about the environment in which it's in, the neighborhood, different comparable selections, data, different things like that. So we see them all the time in all sorts of different components of the process.
Yeah.
Not only in the investment space, Dave, but we also see them in the servicing space too. So as you've got properties that are going into default, really the servicer is going to understand, okay, we need to do a modification, really what's worth it here? What do we need to go about for our process? So they'll get ordered way up in the line after a property first starts going delinquent, just to see, okay, what's the situation? What is our plan now with the borrower? So it's not only just guys that are investing in a few notes. You know, we've got huge also capital market investors that are using them for their portfolios as well. So maybe they're looking to do a trade, get something off of their books. They'll do them along with AVMs, you know, before even taking that next step, that action.
So let me just jump real quick. Let's define what BPO stands for. And is it always done by the same person? So Brandon, what does BPO stand for those that are not familiar with it?
Absolutely. It's a broker price opinion. And so typically what occurs, or generally what occurs, is we contact a real estate agent in that local market. They go and take photos of the property. Depending on which company you're dealing with, you know, it may vary in the requirements. For instance, we ask to provide a front photo, both sides, both views of the street, what the subject faces. We ask for very detailed photos. If it's an interior, we want 2 photos of every room from a different angle, one pointing slightly up, one pointing slightly down from opposite corners of the room, so we can get a good general idea of what's going on in that property. And then they're going to look for 3 sales comparables and 3 active list comparables. They're going to make some assumptions based on what kind of property it is, or what kind of inspection it is, right? If it's an exterior, we've got to make some assumptions. We state those assumptions in ours, and then they come to a price conclusion based on their expertise and their experience. So generally, that's what's required for a BPO.
And is it done by brokers all the time? It can be done by agents?
It's generally done by real estate agents. I would say probably anywhere between 25 and 35% of them are actual brokers that do them. Generally, they're just working with a brokerage, and it's most of our panels just a real estate agent.
So we need to back up just for a second. We never introduced you guys. So Stacy and Brandon from Accurate Group, who wants to introduce the company?
So yeah, let's back up. Yeah, wait, Bob, my disconnect. So Stacy, can you share a little about who Accurate Group is, and
absolutely.
How did you get in this space, and what was the background of this?
Yep. So I started with Accurate Group about a year ago. We are a nationwide AMC that does title and valuation work all across nationwide. So we had no footprint in the note investment space whatsoever. So we are the largest provider of title and valuation in home equity. So we work with like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, those kind of guys. I actually have friends who I've worked with at prior companies that I said, hey, do you guys ever use like title reports, BPOs? And kind of got my hand slapped. It was like, well, what do you think we do? So I got a crash course in note investing. I got some links and books that I purchased, also sent to me, and kind of developed this space for Accurate Group that really is coming in as being a better partner and a better solution than trying to go into different markets to try and find what you need. Maybe getting something all the time, but you're not happy with it, but really there's nowhere else to go. So trying just to come in and say, hey, we've got this 20 years expertise. We are actually nationwide, you know, not just a few big cities across the US. You know, we'll be here for you if you have questions on something. If, you know, you're getting a report that you're like, this doesn't make sense, you can actually ask us those questions. And all of our team is based here in the US, that we actually, you know, Brandon will go through his QC process, but we really double check everything before it gets sent to you. So yeah, it's nice that we've been able to come and grow in this space just by doing what we do every day, and really being able to offer you guys solutions and be accurate, no point intended, but point intended, to get you the information that you need for your investment decisions.
Awesome. Very good. All right, so back to BPOs then.
Well, Brandon, how did you get in the space? What did you come from? What was your background?
Well, I got out of college. I came to just was applying for different jobs and ended up at a company called eMortgage Logic, and worked there for 12 years, and later started my own BPO company. After that, there was a couple of acquisitions. We went to Assurant, and then it became part of Zome, and I went off and started my own BPO company here, and we've been doing this for 3 years and working very closely with Accurate Group. So yeah, it's been a fun ride. 15 years in the valuation space. I've been an appraiser.
Oh,
All
wow.
that fun stuff. So yeah,
That's awesome.
Very cool.
been a good experience for the last.
So I don't know if you add this on to your comment about pictures, and how do we know that that's the property that we asked for?
Absolutely. So a couple different ways we do that validation. So obviously, with the technology that's come along with geo metrics and all that kind of stuff, as it pertains to looking at maps that are there, and then leveraging the data that's actually in the photos. We validate it that way technologically, and then through the other means, right, of just making sure, right, we would ask for an address verification photo. Generally, if it's not there, then we do our due diligence by either going back, looking at Google Maps, looking at a previous listing, if there has been one, really any means that we have the capability to do to make sure that that's the same property.
Cool. Cool.
Okay, good.
So, when we order a BPO, how long does it typically take to get one back? Obviously, depending on the area, but what's the typical time frame that we can expect in the return?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just pulling timelines last night for some of our team over there. So for our average exterior time, which includes nationwide and includes rural Wyoming and includes Fort Worth, Texas, it's in business days, sometimes about 2.9 days, and then our calendar days is about 3.67. So,
Okay.
for an exterior, you're looking at 2 to 3 days, and then for an interior, really depends on the access. If it's on a lockbox, it's unoccupied, those generally don't take more than 3 or 4 days. If it's a situation where it's an elongated situation, that could take a week, or we got to work it out with a borrower, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
interiors get a little bit hairier, but our average turn time is less than 5 days on an interior, assuming we don't have any of those challenges.
So, Nathan, what have you done? Sorry, go ahead, Stacy.
I was going to say, Brandon, we started talking about the QC process that you guys do for the photo verification of the location. What other QC steps do you guys take prior to delivering those final BPOs?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a question when you're dealing with price opinions, which it's in the name, right? So there's always a question of accuracy and credibility and all those kinds of things. So when we look at QC as a general term, I can't speak for what other companies do. I can only speak to what we do specifically. But generally, every company is going to have some kind of QC process. But to explain kind of how we do it, we put a lot of focus on who is performing the report, right? Quality is always going to start with who's actually doing it. So we put a lot of focus on who is completing that report, having a history, and making sure that that's an experienced individual that has some knowledge about that specific market. And then going from there, once we feel like we've got the right person to do it, in addition to all the normal technological rules engines and things like that, just normal questions throughout the report, we have valuations expertise in-house. So everybody that has been working here has been doing this for over 7-8 years. Some of these folks have been working for me for 12 years. We've been a long-standing team. These are people with a lot of experience. We put people through valuation courses, not just from a BPO standpoint, but mainly through appraisal methodology, understanding the importance of the various appraisal principles, and then putting them through the racket of really understanding what they're looking at. So some people choose to offshore all that. We keep it in-house. We do everything in here, and every BPO that comes through, someone is looking at it, not just doing data validation, which we do through technology as well.
Okay.
We pull in the local MLS data through various data partners. And so that gets validated when the comp is selected. So if they say it's 2,000 square feet, we want to make sure that public data records and MLS records state that it is also that. Any variances are looked into and checked and then validated and is communicated back to the end user to make sure that if there is some kind of variance, like, hey, there was an added on section, so the tax record does indeed say it's 1,700 square feet, but it's actually now 2,200 square feet. It was a legal, permissible use of that area. Here's that documentation that we found. We want to make sure we send that on. In addition to that, they go through and we do a nice validation of the comparable selection itself to make sure. So when we're, especially on exteriors, there's certain assumptions that have to be made, right? What am I seeing from the outside? It's going to give me a little bit of an indicator on what's going on inside the house. So we make sure that the comparable selection aligns with those assumptions. If we feel like it's a pretty good asset, it's currently occupied, it looks like, based on the exterior, maybe there's some general updates on the interior as well. We're going to align that with these comparables. Sometimes we unfortunately have the situation where we see, well, I think this property is upgraded. They've got a bunch of stuff going on the outside, looks good. But I selected all of these inferior comparables and I aligned the value with that. So we're really looking for those kind of things, not just with the tangible locational differences and the things that you can see in the grid, but also looking at the pictures of the comparables to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, because that's really where the variable pricing is. Right? So, that's what we do on every single one. When we find issues, we send it back. We're kind of stingy. We've got a fail rate of, we ask a lot of questions. We've got a pretty high fail rate, around 46 to 57%, depending on what it is, certainly higher on interiors when there's a little bit more information available. So there's a lot of dialogue between us and the agent. We learn a lot about them. They learn a lot about us and what we're looking for. So we're pretty stringent and pretty proud of what we're able to accomplish there.
So what are your typical limitations? Seem like you guys cover a lot. What are things that you guys struggle with? Obviously, time is always a struggle. You try doing your best you can. Do you have any other limitations at all?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, as it pertains to limitations, there's certain things that we'd certainly not want to compromise the safety and security of the agents doing the inspection. Sometimes we get we would like to customize as much as we can and make sure that we can accommodate any requests, certainly for different types of information. So in that way, your customers could, or your listeners can certainly ask for certain kinds of things, but we're not going to put somebody in a position where they're going to go up and look in through a window or go on somebody's private property and put themselves at risk. But certainly limitations exist. We're not dealing with general contractors. So, we've got different tools that help us identify repairs and things like that. But generally, you're not going to trust your real estate agent to understand all the different nuances and of different construction protocols associated with replacing cabinets, right? And give you a general idea. But I certainly wouldn't look at a BPO and say, wow, okay, well, he said it's only going to cost me 10 grand to fix this house. Probably not where you want to start. We do a lot of different things to try to combat that. We've got relationships with Xactware and things like that we can have as add-ons and go through. But that's generally where we say, okay, we've got an expert in the marketplace and buyer nuance and things like that, and the emotional things that go into buying a house is where we find real estate agents are really, really good. They understand how to find, properties that are going to compete with your asset and give you a pretty good value conclusion. They're not going to necessarily be the best at letting you know how much it's going to take to fix a problem.
Yeah, is there a foundation issue in the backyard that you can't get to?
Yeah.
And that's one of the inherent limitations with when we're doing it as a note. It's an exterior, so that the interior is a mystery. And like you say, oftentimes it reflects the outside, it reflects the inside, but not always. And there's through nobody's fault. I mean that's just one of the risks. That's one of the inherent risks of note investing is if you take that property back, you don't necessarily know what you're getting into when you get inside the front door. Or back door or window, whatever the case might be.
And with these BPOs, they sometimes share the agent's information. Is there any kind of no against us reaching out to the agent if we take the property back, if we buy the property in note, and we would need some local assistance? Are we allowed to speak to that agent directly?
Yeah, I mean, in the process, there's a little bit of a delineation between what we're talking about. We always include the agent's information on there. So I think absolutely. Generally, a lot of agents do these for the hope that maybe down the line they can get involved in that asset somehow as it pertains to actually selling or helping them with that property. So in that way, absolutely. I think if we're talking about trying to get a lot of the point of the BPO is to get an independent third party, unbiased, to get their opinion of the asset. So as it pertains specifically to the BPO, we typically encourage if you have something that's going on with the BPO or you got a question about it, route that back through us instead of, reaching out to the agent and potentially creating some kind of issue
absolutely.
there. So,
And if we have a problem with a BPO, we can say we don't agree with it. We want to argue that BPO and say, whoa, why are the comps 3 miles away? We're in Chicago. It makes no sense.
absolutely. And we hopefully be catching that on the front end, but certainly there's situations where there's a decision to be made and the end user doesn't agree with the decision that was made. And so certainly, we always welcome that feedback. Come back to us, say, hey, I don't necessarily feel this way, or what about this one? I found this one. It's the same thing that we do to the agents. And sometimes those can get crossed, or maybe there's additional information that you guys are aware of.
Yeah.
We're not. And so we assumed one thing and a little bit more about it. Hey, we'll go back. We'll certainly happy to go back to the agent, get it changed. If we feel like there's a serious issue with the competency of the person who did it, that helps us a lot, get those people out of the system as well as, and we would just get a replacement in that situation. We were buying the line that they gave us, but now we've got to go a different direction. So,
well, Dave, if you have particular parameters that you'd like the BPO agents to follow to, say for instance, I have one client who he's like, don't give me any REO properties as comps. If you have those types of rules that you want to follow, make that be aware. That's definitely something that we can cater. We can't go and knock on the front door to see if someone's there, but we can say, based on what we see from the outside, what is that perceived occupancy at the property? So, there are things that we can do for you that kind of help make it out a little bit easier for you.
I'll often follow up with whoever it was that did the BPO, and just more for a sense of the neighborhood and what's going on in that particular neighborhood. There may be everything right with that, but that's fine and that's great, and I'm really happy for that. And then I'll follow up and say, so is there anything nearby? I had an example where one was right close to it was a football or baseball stadium or something like that, which could be a plus or a minus, and it's just good to know. I don't know that kind of stuff. I don't know how, the proximity to this place or this store or that school even, they can.
Yeah, there are high power lines behind the property, what's on the corner.
Yeah.
And then they tell me all kinds of things, and just
is it close to a school, close to a church?
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things. Is there a major highway nearby? Because that's over the railroad tracks kind of a situation a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you can see, some of those barriers, like a highway is not too hard to see on a map. However, I've been in cities where if you cross this street, on this side of the street, it's this, and it's not a major thoroughfare or anything like that. It's just the locals know that on this side of the street, it's like this, and on that side of the street, it's like that. And how else do you put that on the report? You can't really. So that follow-up is pretty key.
And that's a key thing. You're right. Because there's sometimes where that street may be a deviation from 1950 that just certain people live on one side. So in that deviation, you can't see anywhere else. And that local person is that local key to everything. So if I go ahead and I want to buy BPO from you guys, what is the typical process? Walk through either a new investor or experienced investor. Are they emailing? Are they sending a thing online? Are they logging in? Tell them about the process.
Yeah, so it's really easy for us. We have a standardized note investor agreement. So you actually not only will you get BPOs available to you, but other types of valuation and also title. So right out of the gate, you basically have access to go into your client portal where not only do we keep a document vault of everything that you're ordering, but we also email it to you. So I have some guys, they never log into it, don't even know what their password is. They email me everything. I send it out. We have other guys that they love going in there. They actually use it as their own file recording system. So you can upload documentation based on the property level. We also have it set up where each property has its own kind of title page to it. So if you want to order a BPO, then say, hey, you know what? I am going to go down through this path and then want to order title on it. You can do that as well. So
That's
we
awesome.
really make it easy. It's as simple as putting in the address. We don't even need the borrower name, put in unknown and any special instructions. And then we shoot it right off and we treat you guys as if you're the biggest servicer on the planet. So we don't have any delineation based
That's
on,
awesome.
you know, who the client is. It just goes right out through our network.
Awesome.
So what kind of special requests can we make? Like, what are some common ones that might come from note investors?
Well, like I said, occupancy. So, hey, can you tell me if you think anyone's there? You know, I get sometimes like, hey, is the electricity on? Can you see something like that? So we also get notices and postings that can make a big difference. So, you know, if you could get a zoomed in photo on the front to kind of see, has it been condemned? What's going on there? So just little things like that.
Can we
Brandon, do you
go-
get any other specific requests from any of the larger clients as well?
We certainly had situations where if it's something that's easy enough, we can always add. Our forms are generally customizable to a certain extent, so we're always happy to answer any specific questions. And sometimes with some of these smaller deals, there might be some additional information that can be provided, and that's always welcome too. So yeah, there's special requests, but there's also the capability to say, hey, I know a little bit about this asset. Here it is, and leverage that when you're driving by and seeing, hey, to Stacy's, somebody living there. How'd you verify that? Was there a bunch of mail piled up, or was the lawn mowed? All that different kind of stuff. Give me a little bit more color around that specifically, because I'm very sensitive to that particular item. So those are generally the kinds of things that we get.
Or like description neighborhood or description on the neighborhood, like you were mentioning, Nathan, like, hey, just give me a quick overview. Like what's the neighborhood kind of like? So within what they're allowed to do legally as realtors, they'll do the best that they can for you.
Right.
So
we have a section in the form specifically that asks for things in an appropriate measure as it relates to what's the density, are there any burnouts on the streets, or what's the local crime statistics, things like that, around how can we ask those types of questions and give a little more information without breaking down and crossing any lines.
So you mentioned you run O&E reports and title reports, stuff like that. These BPOs, these exteriors ones we really look for, right? We don't do the interiors until we take ownership of it typically. What is the typical pricing that a BPO may cost us and an O&E will cost us? We got the time frame 2-3 days, which is pretty good, right? And O&E, I presume, would be the same kind of time frame depending on where it's located.
Exactly. So it's $100 for an exterior BPO, $135 for interior. And for our property reports, they base on whether it's current owner, if you're doing juniors, or it's a 2-owner or full owner search. Like you said, they do vary based on the state that you're looking at, but our turn time for those are 2 days for 2 owners. They can sometimes go a little bit longer. I saw in Alabama that the abstractor had to go all the way down to the county and go through the giant books to try and find a death certificate and transfer, but they're pretty quick. We actually have our search team is based out of South Carolina, and we've got thousands of them that do searches nationwide for full title commitments. So they're not saying, oh, this is just for an E&O report. It would be doing the same search as if you were getting a full title policy. So we'll write out chains of assignments, write any notes if there's anything weird, gaps that we see. We check for bankruptcies and also foreclosures. So if you do have to service it and somebody's in bankruptcy, you don't get a surprise there. Just things that, are usually included in our reports. So we physically search ones that we have to, and you're not just getting.
Now we got a lot. What's going on?
Oh, technology today. That's
So,
interesting too, because the O&E report is something we really care about, and most of the time we don't get the foreclosure information. Well, sorry, the bankruptcy information tied into it. So that was a really cool key point that I had not seen before. That's pretty cool. I didn't hear the pricing yet, but I'm sure we'll get that later. So
one thing I wanted to add in there so just for the information of the newer investor, when we're talking about timelines, so you've put in your indicative bid and then you've got a funding date. And in between that time is when you do your BPO and your title search. Now, first of all, plan that time in. So don't say, all right, indicative bid is in today, we're going to close tomorrow. That's not going to work because it takes time to get these reports back.
yes,
A week, 10 days, that's fine. If for some reason it's going longer than that, just say that to the seller. Just let them know what's going on. Let them know, you know what, I'm waiting on this BPO. It was a place where maybe a more remote location and we had trouble hiring somebody to do the report in the first place. Something, whatever the case is. Don't make stuff up. But
I've been times where BPO took a week to get back. Just
sometimes.
What it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was very rural, and they had a hard time getting an agent, and they had to drive. The agent had to drive 30 miles, and it was a Thursday. Like I couldn't get till Tuesday.
Yeah.
Those things happen.
Yeah.
So,
but just let them know what's going on, and
so just
9 times out of 10, that's fine.
Refreshing the fact that when you make that indicative offer, you don't gotta do any of these back end stuff. Right. And I'm spending money on BPOs, not spending money on the O&E report. You're really spending money after they accept that offer.
Right.
Right. They accept the offer. Now you're going to dive into due diligence, your collateral file, your BPO, your O&E. Those kind of things are what comes into play. And you're reviewing the collateral file.
Yeah.
Are there different types of BPO external? Is there different kind of things? I've only ordered the one. So is there different kinds of O&E BPOs done externally?
I mean, we do a couple of different kinds of BPOs. So we could do just the normal exterior BPO. We talk about interior BPOs. We talk about one of the things that we like to do here. I don't know how wide spread it is across different providers, but we also do desktops here as well. So we do desktop BPOs and desktop evaluations. So sometimes we did a good example was yesterday. Bank they needed something within 24 hours. They had an inspection done, full-blown inspection, like full property inspection. They provided us that, and we completed a desktop in-house. So we can do that. We can also, that was a desktop evaluation. We also do desktop BPOs in the same kind of scenario where if an inspection is provided to us or they've got a situation where we're just going to make an assumption, whatever we can find online, and they just want a desktop. Those are cheaper alternatives in something where we just need to get something quickly, or they're just looking specifically for the data within the BPO and not necessarily the inspection component. So those are options as well.
Dave, I apologize. I caught your computer bug.
Yeah, I know it's going around.
Sorry.
It's all good. So the one that we left off with was what's your pricing for the E&O? We call it O&E report, E&O report, which definitely tells you the occupancy. And typically the E&O report tells us from the person, the time they buy that property till now, right? The Sec 2 party is typically what we don't get into the 30 years and stuff like that. We want to know because typically when an asset has a title policy on it, that protects the back end, typically. And then ours is just from the day they bought it till now, what liens have been attached to it, what's happened to it, and things like that. So what is your cost for an O&E report to be ran?
Yeah, so they do vary by state. So what I can do for you is I can send you our PDF of pricing. If you want to share it with your network, they're more than welcome to. It's completely transparent. So
awesome.
We do QC all of them prior to them getting sent over. And if you have any questions about what you see, we encourage every single one of our investors to give us a ring. We give you the contact information for our entire search department. So you always have somebody that you can physically call.
That's great, because a lot of new investors get scared when they see the report. They're saying, well, I don't know what to look at. I see first liens, second liens, and I see the list of people. What happened here? So guys, be sure to give a call, reach out and say, listen, I don't understand this, right? Or I'm curious more about this part of it.
If you question something too, I mean, we have some states where it's not required to, actually record the mortgage. Or if you're dealing with some companies that They bought a whole bunch of assets. Was it Harbor or something like that? They were terrible when they were disposing all of their assets. So we see everything that you can possibly think of. If anything ever seems weird, please reach out. Don't feel like you're alone with anything looking in a vacuum.
I think the biggest struggle we have is when there's water lien, things like that, which is extremely difficult because sometimes it's not recorded. Maybe it's with the city and things like that. So,
we had a school tax situation. So one of our new clients, they had pulled a title report from a different company and found out that that property actually fell on 2 counties for the school tax.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up not knowing they had like a $12,000 back tax situation. So yeah.
Wow.
So it really does. We actually have all of our note investors. I mark them. I have them flagged all as NPLs. So we do a certain extra level of check on taxes for you guys, especially with that sheriff tax sale situation where you could potentially fall into. So
yeah.
I definitely know what you guys are going through.
Wow, that's awesome.
And between those 2 reports, that's like absolute must do. And I've been tempted every once in a while to skip, and I've shared stories in the past of ones where I did skip and it didn't turn out well. You absolutely have to get both of those things done. Even if you think you know what the property looks like, no, get the BPO, get somebody out there. Unless you looked at it yesterday, like get somebody out there that can actually look at it.
Exactly. It's just the risk, Nathan, right? So you're looking at $100 for BPO title reports, they're what, 85 to maybe 165 based on like the crazy states, but you're getting full tax information and things like, if maybe you're only paying 5,000-6,000 for, one of these properties in a bigger pool, but if it's going to cost you, 15 grand down the line, like no way.
Yeah.
So it's just not worth it.
And those who haven't seen the reports before, typically they have a collateral attachment to it. So you're going to see other reports on there. So you can see additional stuff like the foreclosure stuff. So guys, if you're buying an asset, O&E is always a must, right? And the BPO knowing that value, because anything could happen yesterday. And that's the problem. A fire, a house burned down, whatever the reason is, all those kind of things can happen. And having that local agent is a local hands hold for you. Right. So if you need to know something, or if you reach out to them later and say, listen, I need to do another drive-by. We're about to foreclose situation. Can you just drive by the property? Sure. And that connection you have is something valuable when you take the property back and you need someone to help you with the disposal of the property. They're there. They're that local connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the title and then having that agent in place is so key. And I gosh, the majority of time, wouldn't even try to put a number on it, but the majority of the time, the person who did the BPO is my agent in that place, in that city, in that town, whatever it is. And it's an absolute shoe in. And then from the agent, they usually have somebody that can do the clean out. They usually know a locksmith that they use and trust. They'll have all kinds of other resources that you're going to need.
We talked a little bit beforehand about different code violations. If you end up having a property that's in dismal condition, you could be getting, Dave, you're in New Jersey. We had a situation with a servicer. They got a property. It was like $200,000 in this historic district in New Jersey, and had to go and call and, basically just say, hey, we've got the property now. We're taking it over. Here's when someone's going to be out there, and really got those down. But it's, you never know what you face if you don't physically go to the property. You just have no idea.
Yeah. It's so key. Always.
And as BPOs change and they adjust, some of the key things that people miss on, the fact is the roof conditions like that. You can definitely see sometimes with the roof. Brandon, are you guys exploring the whole idea of doing drone work at all? Is that something that's coming out about to see the roof condition? Because you can't see it from street level.
It's one of those things that we're not finding it all that uncommon for many of our agents to have drones. We're generally using for certain situations where we can't fully see the asset. It's down a private drive, and so it might just get a
That's
picture.
awesome.
Certainly for those situations. Where we can, we're starting to do a little bit more work with some people in the fix and flip space that are looking for those kinds of things. So absolutely, I think we're on the cusp of probably turning that corner, getting a network. We've actually started, two of our enhancements that we've got kind of focused in systematically over the next few months is being able to identify which of our agents, we're used to saying, okay, do they have a license and do they have, and all that kind of stuff. Now do they have a drone? And
Yeah.
part of the selection criteria, because we've got very specific needs, as we try to, work our way as how we can help people in that space. That's a really huge thing. So how do we bridge that gap? So as I spoke earlier, you're not necessarily going to trust a real estate agent to give you an exact price that a contractor would on it, but as much information that we can provide to help in those scenarios, how can we make sure that we can provide that? So that's absolutely on our radar and is a focus.
Yeah. That's awesome. So guys, as you heard here, BPOs ownees, they're actually catering to the note investors versus BPO companies that are really big, who just cookie cutter stuff together, which is frustrating because a lot of times, they have no clue what we actually want or need. They can't actually really focus what you're looking for. It's key here, right? Knowing a local condition, asking a particular question. Hey, listen, is there any kind of situation here that I should be aware of or concerns locally? And they usually could answer that question, right? And those kind of things. My last question, I'll let Nathan hit his last question too, is there a situation you guys come across where things weren't as Google Maps shows to be, or investors like, wow, this surprised me? Anything on a BPO ever surprised you guys or jump out that just was shocking?
Oh yeah, we've got them where, like we were talking about before. You go, there's supposed to be a house there. Google Maps from 5 years ago says that there's a house there. You go and it's a concrete slab. And we've actually had it where the investor came and he was like, you went to the wrong property. You guys went to the wrong property. You made the mistake, go back. And we spent an extra 2 days doing the research, sent, guy back out, everything else, no house there. Got the apology, said, thanks so much for double checking for me. But it happens. I mean, and my one investor, he had 2 fires in the same month. So you could have a front of house look good. And then if you're going up the street, looking at the side, like Nathan said before, it's just not there. So it is almost like the Wild West, right? So they are your only line of defense in that actual local neighborhood.
Crazy.
Brandon, you've done it long enough. What's the weirdest thing you've seen?
I've got 2 favorites. Probably one of my top was we went and we were expecting to see a mobile home, a manufactured home there. And what we saw was this gigantic, poorly constructed monstrosity. And as we kind of investigated a little bit more, what we found is they left the mobile home intact in the middle and started building around it and made it, it was a single wide originally and turned it into this 3,000 square foot structure. But the bathrooms were in the middle because they didn't leave plumbing. So the bathrooms were still where the bathrooms were. And, it was this very fun thing. I think the other thing I saw was a pool conversion. We had a pool conversion where they roofed it and somebody lived. It was an ancillary unit. It was advertised as a 2-unit property.
Oh my goodness.
California. And they had actually just put something over the pool and somebody was living down there and they had a vent that ran down to get the air circulation. But it was like full on. It started at 3 feet, goes down to 8 feet. The bed was over here in the corner. It was.
That's
Rental
awesome.
income.
So, we've seen some crazy things. So get the inspection done. Definitely find out what you're buying.
Ethan, maybe that's on your list of those notes coming through.
Oh my
Maybe
God.
it might be. We'll see. No, it's $100, and
guys.
it's so worth it to get that $100. Have somebody out there and just have a look and just know for sure. Especially, I mean, if you're gonna go drive by yourself, I guess that's one thing. Personally, I would still rather have a realtor go by and let me know what they know about the neighborhood, because even if it's the town next door, it could be a totally different neighborhood, and you may not know what you think and the realtors do.
Yeah.
Especially Cleveland, like where I'm from, it is street by street, right? So
Yeah.
you've got multiple different zip codes with that Cleveland name, and it just really all depends. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Nathan, I'll let you ask the final question.
Yeah, what do you guys see coming down the pipe? Have you seen any trends coming out of COVID? Anything that's been different that indicates any future performance? We'll leave it open like that.
Yeah.
So I was actually talking to one of my girlfriends in servicing. So she works at a very big servicing house. And she was saying that the reason why you're just not really seeing any defaults right now is because the regulators are working to making sure that there is a stream and not a waterfall of them. So the kind of view is that they are all still coming, but they're going to be coming more on a scattered approach. So I know nobody really kind of wants to deal with that, having their legacy with another like 2008 crisis, but
Yeah.
she said that they're still kind of just ramping up and waiting for it. So
Interesting. Interesting.
Brandon, what are
Anything
your
on the property side?
Yeah, Brandon, what are you thinking property wise?
Generally, I think there's been a long line of situations. Even pre-COVID, we felt when we started everything that we were probably on the cusp of a little bit more of a default wave. COVID, I think, kind of temporarily bailed out some of that situation. I think there were a lot of people that found themselves delinquent and then found themselves with relief, right? So I think that there is certainly things, it's hard to say. This one's a very unique situation because it is very hard to say, but based on what we're seeing, I mean, a buddy of mine just bought a house. He missed out on 2 houses and he was $40,000 above the list price on his offer with conventional financing and a big down payment. He had to go as far as I think he ended at $52,000 above the list price in order to get looked at. He did get that house. One of our employees' neighbors, they ended up selling their house for $70,000 above list, and there was 40 offers, on that property in 2 days. So I think there's definitely a supply problem all across the country, certainly in North Texas, and I think that will help stabilize out some prices as we go, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity. But I think we still might have a bunch of craziness as that supply starts to become available, and people have money to spend. So,
yeah, it's definitely a weird comment right now because we're seeing the same thing in New Jersey. Prices are still crazy. Over list prices normal. One of my good friends runs a very large REO division for a big fund, and he's like, I can't. If a property gets bid, everything's as is, and if you're not above list price, I'm not even looking at it. It's just wild. And he's managing, 800 plus REOs. And he says, Dave, it's unbelievable what we're dealing with. My BPO, they're getting like 30 or 40 a month still. And he's like, listen, I'm dwindling down quicker. This is great. I'm selling properties faster. As is. No questions asked, no contingencies. And it's amazing, he says, right now for him. We're seeing the same thing in our property values, right? In our side, me and Nathan's talked to a lot of people. There's not many defaults going on our side either. We're not seeing the default levels like we all expected to. But at this point, all our values are going up at the same time, it's like Florida for the whole country right now for us. So that's interesting. So, well, guys, I think
time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah,
Stacy.
Oh, I was just going to say, before COVID and everything, it looked like the price of performing notes were going up. Are those skyrocketed right now? Like, is it better off, to take a risk for a non-performing and kind of look to see what you can get from why did they kind of go, dirty for a little bit? Or is it safer just still to pay a little bit more and go that performing route?
I'll let you feel that first, Nav.
That's a tough question. Obviously, part of it depends on your risk level and your tolerance. For myself, I've always done NPLs, and so because I like the discount more than anything else, and I don't mind putting in the work. If you're looking for something just in retirement that you don't have to do anything with and touch, it's probably worth it to spend a little bit more and just get a performer and let it ride. So I think it's still in the realm of personal preference, whatever you're more comfortable with.
I would say performers are really high. Unless you're an individual investor just trying to get rid of their portfolio, I have 3 assets, just trying to sell them off. You can usually sneak them away. But yeah, performing notes are expected to get 90, 95% of, of UPB, even with a 3 or 4% coupon. It's really wild. Even non-performers are high priced now, where, when we got started, we're buying at 30 cents, and there was no way to get above 65. We're seeing it sometimes non-performers selling at 70, 75, and it's everything's up. And the reason being is, from my understanding, is we kind of tailor along REOs, and REOs are up, right? They're above what the value of the property is. So we're just tailing behind it. We're always a percentage below it. And because it's over 100%, our NPLs are getting priced high, right? Buying it at 65, 70 is ridiculous 5 years ago, but now we're seeing a lot of that people winning those offers, those kind of things. We're also
That's
seeing a lot of people
crazy.
getting in the space, making offers that are just not so smart sometimes, and they're also helping drive that price up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, pricing is just what it is across the board with real estate. It's just wacky. So,
And that, subject to change, who knows?
yeah, we're hoping so, right?
Yeah.
I always like to ask guys what they're investing in when they come on board too. So it's fascinating to see kind of the breadth that, is within your industry too. So
Yeah.
So
100 ways to skin this cat. There are so many ways to do it.
so many angles to play here.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your wealth of knowledge, sharing information, but also what you guys are doing for the note space and really focusing on it so that you can help out even the advanced investors as well as the beginners, and hand holding them, but tailoring it to it to make it more comfortable. Getting an asset outside your backyard is probably the most difficult thing that people convert over from real estate to notes to do. And having that trust and insurance that that property is secured by tools and resources that you guys can provide makes it a lot easier for that investor to get into it. So
Yeah.
I thank you
Those
very much.
things where we know it's hard to get $15,000 to buy your first note. I personally don't have it. I got to start off JV, but it's one of those where, we kind of try and treat it like it's our own money. So we do
Yeah.
get it.
Definitely.
I mean, yes, it's $100, but it's $100, right? So we want to make sure you're getting value for that. So
Yes.
we want to put as much as we can into it, and make sure it's something that's valuable to you, worth more than $100. This should be an easy thing for you. So we want to make sure that it's not just, just a piece of paper that I got the pictures and that was the only thing that was really worth it to me.
Right.
More than information. That's awesome. Well, guys, have a great weekend. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us.
Thanks for
Thanks so
coming.
much for having us.
You
Next
bet.
week we'll be on again, guys. Nathan, enjoy your weekend, my man.
Yeah, you
Hopefully
too.
everything goes well.
Absolutely.
Enjoy. Have a great time.